My name is Jackson Miller. I'm 32 years old, and this happened on August 14th, 2017. It was early morning, just after dawn, when I set out onto Lake Serenity with my two best friends. I'd been dreaming of this trip for months. After long weeks of overtime shifts at the steel mill in Ruston, Georgia, I finally convinced my friends, Marcus and Tyler, to join me on what I promised would be the fishing trip of a lifetime. Marcus, a lanky southern kid with a contagious grin, was 29. Tyler, 27, was the quiet type, a budding photographer who carried his camera even on a fishing trip. We'd rented a small cabin lodge on the lake's northern shore, complete with a battered old aluminum boat and a rickety motor that coughed to life every morning. Our plan was simple: canoe across the calm water before sunrise, find a promising cove loaded with bass and catfish, and spend the day hauling in trophy catches. I prepped all the gear: rods, reels, tackle box packed with every lure imaginable, a cooler full of sandwiches and cold sodas, and a bag of trail mix just in case. Lake Serenity had the reputation of being a peaceful retreat, nestled between the pine forests of northern Georgia. It wasn't on any major fishing map, which only added to its mystique. Rumor had it the lake was bottomless in places, and old-timers swore they'd heard strange sounds echoing across the water at night. Whispers of an old tragedy that had occurred before the lake's dam was built. I grew up fishing with my dad on the Chattahoochee River, so I was confident I knew what I was doing. Marcus and Tyler were less experienced but eager to learn. The three of us had bonded over our love of the outdoors in college, and this trip was supposed to be our crowning memory. We arrived at the dock at 5:15 a.m., the mist rising off the glassy water. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were our footsteps on the wooden planks and the distant call of a loon. We unloaded our gear, slapped life jackets on, and pushed the boat into the dark water. The motor sputtered but eventually hummed steadily as we glided toward our chosen spot. For the first few hours, everything went perfectly. We landed a handful of largemouth bass, their green scales flashing in the morning light. Marcus drilled me on knot tying techniques, and Tyler snapped pictures of every catch. Fish wriggling on the deck, water droplets suspended in midair, triumphant grins all around. At about 9:30 a.m., we decided to move to a deeper section near what looked like a submerged island. The water was darker there, almost black, and the motor's hum felt oddly heavy, like it was pushing us towards something we couldn't see. I chalked it up to fatigue and my imagination. We anchored over a deep trench and dropped our lines. I was using a bright chartreuse spinnerbait, Marcus had a plastic worm rig, and Tyler was experimenting with a homemade crankbait. The sun was high now, and sweat soaked our shirts as we cast and reeled. The coolness of the morning had given way to the summer blaze. By noon, the bites had slowed. We were thirsty, tired, and starting to joke with one another about heading back to the cabin for cold beer and steaks. I glanced at my watch, 12:08. I cast one last line and felt the telltale tug almost immediately. I lifted the rod tip and the line went taut. This is when things shifted. The fish I hooked was huge, no doubt a massive catfish the size of a toddler. But the fight felt strange. The pull on the line was relentless, but the tugging came in uneven surges, almost like something down below was testing our resolve. My heart hammered as I braced myself, reeling in tighter and tighter until my arms burned. Marcus moved closer, offering to help, but I waved him off. This was mine. After a brutal 5-minute battle, I saw it break the surface. At first, I thought it was the catfish. Gray, mottled skin, whisker-like barbels waving in the sunlight. But then it turned. Its eyes were wrong. They reflected the sun like black marbles, and there was an intelligence behind them that unnerved me. The body beneath those eyes was too long, tapering in a way no catfish ever should. Its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. I froze. Marcus yelped. Tyler dropped his camera. The thing thrashed, dragging the boat off balance. I lost my footing and stumbled, almost falling overboard. Marcus lunged to steady me, but the creature's tail lashed out, smacking the side of the boat and sending a spray of water and blood into the air. The metallic tang hit my tongue, and panic roared in my ears louder than the motor. "Cut the line!" Tyler yelled, scrambling for the anchor rope. I severed the line with the hook knife, and the creature sank back into the depths with a sinister twirl of its tail. The boat lurched, and Marcus hit his head on the railing with a sickening crack. He slumped, dazed, as I fumbled to turn the motor around. I jammed the throttle forward. The motor complained, then roared, pushing us away from that trench faster than I ever thought possible. Tyler reached over to help Marcus, checking his head wound. Marcus was bleeding, dark rivulets running down his temple, but conscious. I steered toward open water, away from that black maw. The laughter and camaraderie of the morning felt like a cruel memory, one that I couldn't quite trust. We made it back to the cabin in record time, adrenaline fueling every nervous motion. Inside, we locked the door, propped a chair under the knob, and sat in uncomfortable silence. The afternoon sun beat against the windows as we patched Marcus up with the first aid kit. Tyler scrolled through his photos, his hands shaking. He glanced at me and whispered, "Did you see it? Or am I losing it?" I nodded, throat tight. I'd replayed that moment a dozen times already. That night, after a couple of beers and a meal we barely touched, we listened to the lake lapping against the shore. Every creak of the cabin made me jumpy. We speculated, muted theories about mutated fish, some undiscovered freshwater predator, maybe a prankster's fish decoy with teeth glued on. But deep down, we knew what we saw. Couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, picturing those teeth and that endless black stare. At 3 a.m., I wandered outside, flashlight in hand, to gather my thoughts. The lake was a midnight mirror, and the moonlight barely cut through the haze. I scanned the waterline. Nothing. But then I heard it. A faint scraping like nails on wood, coming from the dock we'd tied the boat to. My flashlight beam danced over the rotting planks. There, just at the edge, were 3 dark shapes glistening in the beam. Fish teeth. Not just random fish teeth. Clusters of them, embedded in the wood, arranged in spirals and clusters, as if someone or something had taken its time. My stomach lurched. I stumbled back, my heart thunderous. I ran inside without a second thought. By morning, we had packed up and left Lake Serenity behind. We didn't speak of it much, only exchanged vague nods about something nasty down there. In the years since, I've told myself it was a hallucination, fueled by exhaustion and heat stroke. But I know what I saw. I've heard rumors that others have had strange encounters on quiet lakes around the country. Fishermen who reel in something they can't explain. Boaters who glimpse a shape beneath the surface, then never speak of it. It's as if the lake itself hides its secrets, waiting for the unwary. For Marcus, the trip left him with nightmares of jagged teeth and dark waters. He's never fished again. Tyler still goes on photo expeditions, but he sticks to mountains and forests now, no more lakes. As for me, I'm cautious. I fish only in well-charted rivers with plenty of company. And every August 14th, I find myself staring at my gear, remembering that terrible day. That morning began with promise and ended with something born of nightmares. I've tried to forget, but the memory haunts me like a shadow under the boat. Be careful when you cast your line into water you think you know. You might pull up more than you bargained for. This story is over. Get ready for the next one. My name is John Marshall. I'm 32 years old, and the incident happened on September 14th, 2023. I never expected a quiet day of fishing to turn into the most harrowing experience of my life. It began at Clearwater Lake, a glassy expanse of water nestled in northern Minnesota, where the early morning mist clung to the surface like a shroud. I was accompanied by my longtime friend Mike Travers, a burly, sun-weathered man of 35 with a laugh as big as his tackle box. We had driven up the night before, pitching our tents near the old boathouse at the far end of the lake, under a canopy of towering pines. The plan was simple: wake before dawn, slip into our aluminum skiffs, and set lines for walleye and northern pike. Over the previous weeks, rumors had circulated through the small town of Birchwood about a legendary monster muskie lurking in these waters, something the locals called Old Gus. They described him as a fish of mythic proportions, at least 6 feet long, with teeth like shards of glass. I dismissed it as fishermen's tall tales, stories spun to give meaning to the cold nights and slow reels. But Mike, ever the believer in local lore, insisted we stand a better chance of reeling in the catch of a lifetime if we came prepared for something big. As we loaded our gear, I introduced you to the other characters in our little drama. Sarah Newton, the lake's sole bait shop owner, who had weathered the uncertainties of tourism with a no-nonsense attitude, and Billy Harper, an amateur wildlife photographer whose Instagram was full of trout selfies and drone footage of osprey diving for fish. Sarah had given us her phone number in case of trouble, while Billy had promised to join us later with his camera boat, hoping to capture that perfect shot of Old Gus breaking the surface. The sun peeked over the treeline just as we pushed off. Our lines were baited with smelly crawlers and live minnows, fresh stock from Sarah's cooler. The lake was so still the only sounds were our oars dipping into the water and the occasional loon's haunting call. We drifted into the deeper channel, weaving between submerged logs that, to an untrained eye, looked like dark skeletons just beneath the surface. For the first 2 hours, nothing stirred. Mike and I traded stories about jobs, kids, and the upcoming high school reunion. I marveled at his ability to find humor even when our bobbers stayed stubbornly still. By mid-morning, the sun climbed high enough to burn off what little mist remained, and beads of sweat formed on our foreheads. It was then that Michael's rod bent with an almost supernatural force, so quickly that he barely had time to shout. "I've got something huge!" he yelled, his voice cracking as he braced himself. The reel screamed as line rushed out, and his skiff rocked dangerously. I cut the engine and rowed over, heart pounding, to grab the net. He fought the fish with every ounce of raw strength he possessed. After what felt like a lifetime, maybe 5 minutes, though it could have been 20, the line snapped with a twang, and the lure disappeared into the depths. Mike sank to his seat, pale. "That was no pike," he said through clenched teeth. "That was Old Gus." I tried to reassure him, but the look in his eyes told me he believed every word. We decided to move closer to the shore, to fish the shaded weeds where pike liked to lurk. As we drifted, I noticed the sky darkening far off to the west. What had been clear blue 20 minutes ago was now streaked with ominous gray. A cold wind whipped across the water, stirring tiny whitecaps. Neither of us liked storms, especially on a lake this size, but we told ourselves it would pass, as these sudden squalls often did. We'd lost our best bait to that colossal strike, but I was determined to get one of my own. I cast my line toward a submerged drop-off and settled in, trying to ignore the growing swirl in my stomach. That's when the first thunderclap rattled the sky, so loud it made the boat shudder. Mike looked at me, eyes wide. "We should head in," he said. But as he spoke, a wall of wind hit us, rocking the skiff so hard I thought it might capsize. Rain began to lash down, fat drops that stung like needles. The lake turned from glass to a churning stew, waves rising around us. We fumbled to start the engine, but the outboard coughed and died. I cursed under my breath as I reached for the oars. With soaked hands, I began to row toward the paddock, the only safe haven within shouting distance. Mike banged on the hull, urging me faster, but the storm was relentless. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the water in stark white flashes. Each thunderclap seemed to explode the world. After what felt like an eternity, we spotted the dark shape of the boathouse. I rowed with all my might, but a sudden rogue wave slammed into us from the side, spraying us with icy water. Mike shouted, "Hold on!" as the skiff tipped precariously. I braced against the thwarts, muscles screaming, as the wave passed. The boat righted, but now we were dangerously close to submerged logs at the water's edge. That's when I saw something moving in the water beside us. A shadow larger than any fish I'd ever seen. It cut through the waves toward the skiff and my blood ran cold. It surfaced briefly, and I glimpsed a massive head, wide mouth gaping, teeth glinting like knives in the strobe of lightning. It was old Gus. I yelled for Mike to duck as the creature lunged. The current slammed us into a partially submerged piling, splintering the wood. The entire side of the boat groaned. Water poured in. Mike lost his balance and slid toward the edge. I reached out, grabbing his arm just as the creature's enormous tail slapped the water, sending us both sprawling. We clung to the wreckage as the boathouse came into view. It was sliding off its pilings, twisting in the waves. One more strike could shatter our skiff entirely. The fish circled, like a shark assessing its prey. My mind raced. Should I grab the oars and make a dash for the shore, or stay here and risk a direct hit? Summoning every ounce of courage, I tackled Mike and pulled him under the low-hanging dock boards. We crawled, gasping, water up to our knees. Above us, the storm raged and the fish thumped against the boat. I heard the splintering of wood as the boathouse gave way further, then silence. Only the dripping of water and our ragged breathing. We waited until the thunder faded and the rain softened. Then, inch by inch, we inched toward shore, helping each other over slick rocks and fallen logs. By the time we reached dry land, our clothes were shredded, our bodies bruised, but we were alive. It took hours for the storm to pass completely. Sarah Newton found us at dusk, half frozen, eyes vacant with shock. Billy Harper arrived soon after, his camera boat miraculously intact, though it bore claw marks on the hull. He had filmed the storm from a distance, capturing flashes of that enormous silhouette in the water. When he showed us the footage, I saw those jagged teeth. That was no ordinary fish. In the weeks that followed, news spread of our encounter. Local guides swore they'd heard our screams echo across the lake. Fishermen whispered that old Gus had found new respect in those dark waters. I won't pretend that I've made peace with what happened. Even now, every time I fish in calm waters, I scan the depths, wondering if that massive shape will appear again. But I learned something vital that day. Nature reserves the right to remind us of our place. We're visitors on its terms, not the other way around. And while I still cast a line on sunny mornings, I do so with a keener awareness that beneath the glittering surface lies a world vast and unknowable. One that, on that September day, reached up to remind me how small I truly am. This story is over. Get ready for the next one.